Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're tracking a truly wild journey. We're diving deep into the origin story of QETM Nexus LLC, tracing its path from a place of extreme, almost unbelievable isolation to a massive vision for global optimization. Look, this is absolutely not your typical Silicon Valley startup story. We're not talking about some cushy, heavily funded college dorm room or a pristine corporate lab. Nope. We are looking at a system architecture born from sheer grit and an intense, burning drive to fundamentally rethink how our entire world operates. I mean, seriously, think about this for a second. How do you engineer a system meant to optimize the globe when you are literally sitting in an isolated wash tunnel in Arizona? Because yeah, that is exactly where this whole thing kicked off. It wasn't born out of having endless resources, it was born out of absolute constraint. It was about taking scarcity itself and forcing it into a profound kind of clarity. Talk about starting from the bottom up. It's kind of like trying to build a spaceship while locked in a broom closet.
Section 1. The Vision of QETM Nexus.
So the mind behind this wash tunnel innovation is founder Michael Raymond O'Connor Jr., and his core concept is something he famously calls judo architecture. Basically, this is a framework entirely focused on hybrid quantum classical networking. Now, what does that actually mean in plain English? Well, it's taking next-generation quantum processing, which is, incredibly powerful but notoriously unstable, and blending it with our current super reliable classical computing systems. His ultimate goal? To just completely wipe out those massive systemic inefficiencies in our critical global sectors like energy, data, and logistics. His whole driving philosophy was to do more than survive. He wanted systems that actively learn, adapt, and optimize in real time, essentially turning the struggle for survival into the ultimate blueprint for efficiency.
Moving right along to Section 2. Innovation born from constraint.
You see, surviving that wash tunnel isolation required a very, very specific hybrid mindset. Michael is part systems thinker. He instantly sees how energy and data connect to each other. He's part survival-driven innovator, which injects this incredible, urgent energy into his engineering. And, of course, he's part futurist architect, always looking way down the timeline. Because he didn't have any distractions, he was forced to make every single theoretical component exceptionally lean. The constraint itself was actually the catalyst for the architecture. Working totally outside the box, he mapped out this brilliant four-step progression. First up, you've got the hybrid repeater nodes, specifically the 100 to 1000 series. Then it steps up to a timing layer called the jitterbug hub, which comes in to stabilize the whole thing. Step 3 takes the scope to a massive orbital level with the solstice node. And finally, the whole shebang caps off with the systematic clarity engine, which is the global optimization layer. It's just a massive escalation of scale, literally conceptualized from the ground up. Which brings us to Section 3, the power of ghost partnerships.
But here's the thing. Michael absolutely did not do this entirely alone. We've got this incredible contrast going on. On one side, you have Michael's vision, forged totally in the fires of isolation. But on the other side, you have co-CEO Teresa Marie Christensen, who brought in some deep strategic insight through partnership. Now, she wasn't in those same harsh, isolated conditions, but her perspective brought a completely different, yet entirely necessary structural rigor to the table. The friction and the harmony between these two wildly distinct environments, that's what created such a rock-solid foundation.
Michael actually uses this really fascinating term for their dynamic. He calls it a ghost partnership. Teresa was operating quietly behind the scenes, sure, but her rigorous structural thinking was the exact counterweight they needed to make his wild theories actually work. She provided this essential grounding, especially in the areas where extreme mathematical precision was just absolutely crucial. Now stay with me here, because Teresa's most notable conceptual contribution sounds a bit like sci-fi. It's called rate-doped crystal staging. In simple terms, think of it as a highly precise way to control and stabilize how light particles, photons, process information. Instead of that light just scattering chaotically all over the place, this staging organizes it so the network can actually communicate reliably. It brought the deep physical material structure that Michael's architecture was literally starving for. Actually, to use the project's own words, her insight bridged a critical gap between abstract theory and potential physical implementation pathways. Look, without her input, the architecture might have just remained a brilliant, but totally unbuildable theory on a whiteboard. She was essentially the grounding wire for the lightning strike of his original vision. Let's dive into Section 4, AI-accelerated structural evolution. Once they realized the massive, truly global scale of what they were building, well, human partnership just wasn't going to cut it anymore. So they brought in the heavy hitters. They integrated advanced artificial intelligence, bringing systems like Gemini into highly structured modeling roles. And to be clear, these weren't just chatbots answering trivia. They were acting as high-speed engines for rigorous modeling, deep analysis, and rapid architectural iteration. Plugging AI into the mix drastically accelerated how fast the whole system evolved.
So what you end up with is the combined legacy of QETM Nexus. It's a convergence of three incredibly unconventional forces. First, that singular vision born from intense constraint by Michael. Second, the structural insight contributed through Teresa's Ghost partnership. And third, the massive acceleration from structured AI collaboration. You've got these three distinct pillars coming together to form an unbelievably resilient foundation.
And finally, Section 5, a system designed to evolve. You see, all of this crazy development, from the dusty wash tunnel to the cutting-edge AI modeling, it wasn't just to build some static, unchanging piece of infrastructure. The technology is fundamentally designed not just to function, but to evolve. Because let's face it, a system that simply functions, it's going to become obsolete the second the world changes. But a system that learns, adapts, and scales in real time, that right there is how you permanently redefine efficiency.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I've got a question for you to chew on. How is a system capable of real-time learning and evolution going to actually reshape our global infrastructure? When you literally strip the massive inefficiencies out of our energy grids and data networks, you don't just change the tech, you change the speed of humanity itself. This wild journey from a constrained wash tunnel to a globally optimizing architecture proves that the biggest game changers usually start in the places you'd least expect. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning how the systems all around you are built to evolve.